I am NetMoverSitan. Welcome to the rest of the lore of Chapter 2 of Limbus Company. And it will start with an elevator ride. As they descended down to the location of the Golden Bough, Rodia complained about dead insects on the last mission, but there, she pressed the basement button without a grumble. And not just because the elevator was clean. Then once things quietened down, Sald couldn't contain the pent-up questions any longer, such as, how the did she win without using any wish power? Or indeed win regardless? Roger felt overwhelmed and wanted one question to be asked at a time. Then she answered her once she calmed down. It was because the Taiku's crew boss was expecting the Ting Tang gang to cheat. Mulesalt was confused by, as to how does she know that? As details couldn't be determined from a body that would derive ridicule from R2-D2. Rodia elaborated that he knew that they had a wish power extractor, and suspected the boss of the Ting Tang gang, or whoever represented him, would use it. Effie understood that she fooled him into thinking that she was using a wish sticker, so that he'd call her out, when in fact, it was just what she wanted him to think. Which, as Rodia put it, was why she declared that she was going all in, which looks suspicious. A winning gambler creates their own momentum and rides it like a horse into battle. Okay, that second part is how I put it, but you get the idea. Effie and Sard, they didn't know what to say. Rodia noted that even they were fooled by this. Besides, she saw wish stickers as hopes and desires given important-sounding labels. Weird pieces of paper to those that rely on faith. And Sard refused to believe this, seeing Jacob's wish power-related tech as an officially approved semi-singularity, with widely proven efficacy. Yes, I know. English failing me again. Well, it's used by thousands, and Roger saw it more as a confidence booster. She always believed in herself, and Yisang observed that to have faith means the mind may avoid crashing into the depths. He wanted to know how Rodia acquired that faith. Her answer to that was super simple. In fact, Sinclair wanted to know this as well. She just thinks that she's the most awesome person in the world, so whatever anyone says is crock. So a mix of determination and refusing to accept that what she's doing is almost impossible. It made sense to Faust, who agreed with that. Sinclair didn't know what to make about that. Yisang regretted asking. Dante was hoping that it's not how Roger was treating their words. Sadly, this joy didn't last long. As they emerged into a cavern filled with the sounds of pickaxes struck against craggy walls, with security guards waiting around a vault. A clear sign that it won't be that easy to reach their destination. Is it ever? This annoyed Rodia, as this meant winning the game was pointless. She then asked why those slaves were picking away at the rocks. Sald pointed out that while they had earned ownership, there's no physical proof of that, so they'll be seen as potential threats. Dante saw the point in that statement, as they'd be seen as thieves, if seen hiding near the vaults. Ishmael was impressed by the excavation, where there's even space for vaults, all while digging a tunnel. Roger thought it was stunning, as when she dies and stays dead, she wanted to be buried in a mound of cash, to fill her lungs with the scent of it for her final breath. Then Gregor asked about the man at the table. Did she know him? Yes. Roger called him a friend from back home. Dante suspected that their history ran deeper than that. Roger told Gregor that reunions were always uncomfortable. He felt tension when he met his former comrades. Well, Gregor couldn't argue with that. Then Honglu noted something in the cages. He was excited at the thought that there might be pets being raised in them. You have no idea how wrong you are, Honglu. Ishmael was angered by him, asking if his family usually counts creatures violently shaking in their cages as pets. Faust then told them that they're Pecatula, which is what those that first appeared towards the end of Leviathan were called. Dante asked if they thought that they could tame abnormalities. Gregor was reminded of Yuri. She'd knock 3 grown adults out cold with a scoff if she heard that. Yes, Sinclair was pained by the memory of Yuri. Faust saw that it was theoretically possible to train them. This is assuming that they possess a human level of intelligence and a decently successful method of managing them existing. Ishmael noted that they could make good guard dogs, if it works out. Honglu wanted to take a closer look. As for the people, they have fingers or parts of their body bitten off. Dante was thankful that he didn't add, "Is this in fashion?" And then Honglu said that, much to Dante's irritation. Then they were in the dungeon proper, and then they had a problem. As Gregor pointed out, the security guards and the Pecatula. Roger asked Gregor if he had any ideas, as he's been on the front lines, telling him to try something. And Gregor was literally pushed into this. He then bumped into a slave digging away at the rocks. They paused for a moment in awkwardness. Gregor noted that it wasn't pretty for either of them, asking them to let it slide. The slave was silent. Gregor made it clear that he wasn't after the cash in the vault, even if he wouldn't say no to that if it was offered. But they were looking for a way downstairs. Then it was clear that the slave wasn't interested in his presence. Ryosho was irritated by this, demanding that they speak some sense or she'll barf on their hands. Probably meaning bear aggressive rigorous force. Her patience wearing out quickly, threatening to use her sword on the slave. But Sinclair's idea makes much more sense than how I put it. What she really meant was break all remaining fingers. Dante was more scared by how quickly he got that. And apparently that slave was a captive Dessa, He was there to repay his debts, all to return to his family. Each swing taking one arm off the debts, telling him to stop speaking as he needs to keep counting. Ah, so it's a debtor's prison down there. Then they attracted the attention of J-Corp security, much to the worry of Gregor. And then he tried something out that's, well, in an out-of-character voice. Now I'll try to replicate that. We can't live like this anymore! This is outrageous tyranny! To tie the people up and force them to dig, let us all rise up and fight our oppressors! Go onward! Dante was confused by this, as were all the debtors there, and their security guards, although thankfully it didn't distract them from their counting. Heathcliff wanted to know what the that was. Missant understood it as propaganda, his efforts failing miserably. Roger understood that those that ended up there, they did so by living their whole lives as scum, exploiters, and exploited. A half-baked speech wasn't going to be enough to wake up the revolutionary within them. To be honest, I don't think it's made well enough to put in the oven for baking. Besides, I doubt that even if they cleared their debts, their families would be there. Never mind welcome them back. Best case scenario, they'd be dead. Worst case scenario, they'd be, well, if they were married, their wife/husband would remarry, believing them to be dead. Ortiz advised him to work on his acting skills to at least intermediate level before his next instigation operation. Roger teased that he's never tried acting in his whole life. Then he basically said, "Bull" in German, feeling embarrassed. Then they had more urgent matters to deal with, such as agitated security, who proceeded to unlock the cages containing the Pecatula, a risky move, and both fought against the damned dozen. The debtors were even ordered to attack, likely with the incentive of quicker debt repayment if they had killed the intruders. They were victorious, nevertheless, against the security and the Pecatula. And not just because of their combat prowess, overcoming security, as the Pecatula turned on their masters, ignoring their commands to stop, with the captive debtors working as usual, as if nothing happened. The sinners used this opportunity to find their way down. Gregor noted that they helped after all. Yeah, by not getting involved. Roger saw it as coincidence, something that, according to a former fictional spy in a sci-fi universe, happens every day. It doesn't mean that we should trust it, though. Well, she didn't give a regardless. As they fought their way through the caverns, filled with debtors, security, and Pecatula, they encountered what Mirsilt described as a freight container made of smooth and colourful plastic. The prevalence of peculiar materials suggests that this was not a simple manufacturing facility. Then the said container activated with a cheery tune. Sinclair had a bad feeling, which was about to be proven right. and not just because of lack of security. And this was revealed to be, you want to get beat heartily? One of the minions of Have You Become Strong, an aberration of You Must Be Happy, where it can either strengthen or weaken those that use it, and if they use it more than 5 times or enhance themselves too much, it kills them, as there's only so much that unaugmented biology can handle. As for this aberration, it seems to make cyborgs, and this cyborg was highly excited, finding it amusing, wanting the game of death. Faust lacked the words to describe this. After Af was chanted by it, she noticed that excavation efforts have been redoubled from this point onwards. There was no other reasons for augmentation on the conveyor belt that she could see. Dante got the idea, telling them to move as if they've pointed right at them, singing that spooky song. They eventually found Have You Become Strong near a group of cyborgs, which was repairing them as the damned dozen tried to kill them. They figured out that they needed to pin down the strongest of them, and then find the user interface, and say no to becoming strong, despite the warnings of the abnormality. And after 3 times pressing the no button, it shut down, and those cyborgs remaining were unable to self-repair, and were destroyed by them. Yes, the augmentation process also destroys their minds, so they're no longer who they were, nor do they operate on their own volition. They could then proceed deeper into the dungeon, only to find more cyborgs. These ones seemed different, as they were wrapped around by pink ribbons. These were the thralls of the pink shoes, an aberration of the red shoes, the latter being based on a story written by Hans Christian Andersen, where it was a reflection of what he thought of his much-loathed half-sister. As for the pink shoes, it's based on a South Korean take on that tale, where a woman leaves her cheating husband, finds a pair of pink high-heeled shoes that she found in a subway car that were cursed, making her obsessive, envious, and greedy. They wouldn't let her go either, where the wearer would eventually die with their feet chopped off, where the original owner had them stolen, and any that wore them would be in danger until they were returned to their original owner. And it gets worse from there, let's just say that. As for the abnormality, they wrapped around the ribbons that fueled their hosts with desire, making them obsessed with it. When defeating the wearer of the pink shoes, the damned dozen resisted that desire. Yes, resisted that desire and defeated the cyborgs and suppressed the pink shoes completely. As they got deeper, it started to become colder. Sinclair noticed this first, asking why there was ice around. Well, it's not because of the Snow Queen or even aberration of her. Ishmael hopes that this wasn't his idea of a joke, as she feels colder thanks to him saying that. Dante knew better, remembering Faust's words. They understood that they're getting close to the Golden Bough. Faust agreed in a much briefer way than usual. It was discouragingly dull. They fought through this frigid place that they were in, fighting against the icy deserts that somehow made it this far. They looked different to the usual slave labor. It was as if their very soul was frozen. They thought they were through this frozen wasteland within this cavern. Until eventually, then they encountered a monumental castle of ice and frozen pillars that seemed unbreakable. Okay, before you say anything, there will not be a girl that does a lot of singing and cryomancy in here. So don't bother saying that.
Otherwise I will hunt you down and insert a stake driver up your...
Just kidding, I don't have a stake driver, never mind a way of tracking you down. Sadly, Sonia, with his hyaline hair, clear as ice, beat them to it. He was apparently waiting for them. Apparently, he comes there whenever he needs to clear his thoughts, even though there's no rocking chair or whiskey. He keeps a lucid mind due to the chill there that even the thickest coat can't protect from. Roger wasn't expecting him to be there first. Sonia knew of a way to get there, a shortcut that he and his forces knew about. Okay, so they damned dozen beat up the Ting Tang gang, stole their clothes, fought their way through the casino and the dungeon for no reason? Apparently, even some of the locals knew about it. A way leading to a buried great power waiting to be used for the greater good. Ugh. Do you know how sickening that is to hear? As the greater good is a meaningless concept by itself. It's whatever those with power deem it to be, no matter how morally questionable. It's an excuse, if anything. Anyway, the Eredivier couldn't get any farther than that, as there was no way to get close to the Golden Bough. Then, Roger revealed that they were from District 25, the domain of Wycor. She thought that he'd never leave that place, but seeing him now, resorting to the same tactics as the syndicates would use, she believed that he would, he should have stayed a country boy, as they're taking from shopkeepers who aren't even rich to begin with. Sonia ignored that statement and pointed out that what they were seeing used to be an eccentric hollow with frosty walls. Now it's a giant castle with thick columns of ice. This was because she walked in there. Roger wanted to know how he could possibly know this. He apparently had many sources, but he wasn't going to tell her. Now, my suspicions are aroused, as that implies that there's someone that's backing him. Roger wanted to know what made him so sure that it would happen in the first place. Now, she's not not some kind of backstreets witch. Apparently the faces in the ice were enough for him to figure it out. The ones she loved, yet looked down on. Then we saw a vision of her past, when Roger was overhearing a wicked tax collector in District 25, who valued a meagre possession of one that lived there at 250,000 an, which was less than what that person thought it was worth, and this was apparently because of all the scratches and lack of polish. Apparently others wouldn't pay more than 200,000 for that. The rest of that person's possessions were seen as worthless garbage, and this reduced their taxes owed to 400,000 an. Although in the back streets, taxes are another way of saying protection money payments. Roger asked herself why the poor only grew poorer the harder they worked, seeing it as ridiculous, while the stacks of cash piled up in the pawnbroker's vault. That part of the back streets wrung dry. Heirlooms weighed for what little they were worth. Well, that was because the back streets were ruled by fear, where those that are denied at least a comfortable life are easier to control. The nests aren't much better, as if those within there don't perform well enough, they're thrown into the back streets, where if they lacked a means of supporting themselves or had made too many enemies when they were living in the nest, they'd have a life expectancy lower than one that wore leather and held a hamburger inside a Hindu temple in India. Around all this inequality and oppression, Sonia rallied people, delivering speeches using big words. They formed the Urudivie. At first it was okay. He inspired even those that were denser than lead with his words to help the impoverished in the backstreets. But Sonia was dissatisfied with all these words, as that's all that they were. Words. She felt that it became a debate society, where they talked about how to change the backstreets and the nest, yet they didn't do anything. Yeah, I know, all talk and no trousers. It's why she left them. She wanted to feed their starving neighbours, not be an armchair revolutionary. Apparently his excuse was that they were waiting for the right moment. A moment that, as far as Sonia was concerned, it didn't come when their youngest, little Ivan, was forced to sate his hunger with food from the garbage, nor did it arrive when he suffocated to death. He then went on to say that to achieve a monumental task, well-thought policies and a great power to carry them were required, all to make the redistribution of wealth happen, and in the process of moving towards progress, such minor troubles on a personal level were inevitable. Oh, enough of the politicians speak already. Have you bored some of your people to death? What next? Saying that we're one more corpse from paradise? I've heard that before, and not by you. It was minor to him, but to Roger, it was personal. They started up the Urudivie to help others. What they were currently doing was not what she signed up for. So she decided to take more direct action. This involved her doing what she believed her town needed. Empty promises and telling people to sit on their hands until they can think of a workable plan was not what she thought was needed. And it wasn't free spirits that visited the tax collector. It was Roger, who decided to pick her axe up and go Viking on the tax collector. This was with the thought that most of their neighbours were starving for 4 days straight that day. Yet the biting wind was merciless, causing chapped skin on the famished peasants. She knew that the tax collector had enough money to allow them to feast for days and still be full. Then Roger stopped. This recollection of their past. When Sonia asked what she did, as he saw this as a confessional created for her as a result of the Golden Bough resonating with her psyche, to lead her to the path of penance. Well, gender-bent Ebenezer Scrooge was unrepentant. If she was, well, it doesn't matter now. As for Sonia's faults, he knew that the terminal leech would never want to redeem herself. To become a generous philanthropist was a laughable concept. If that wasn't the case, Rodia wouldn't have taken matters into her own hands, as if she was part of a Viking raiding party, going down the River Volga. I mean, she even had the axe. The tax collector mocked Rodion, who was apparently under the delusion that she had become some kind of savior. Demanding money so brazenly wouldn't change anything, seeing the vermin of the group that she was a part of as no different than the paupers in the back streets. Actually, there is a difference between her and them, as she's the one that buried the hatchet through her head, you greedy. Okay. That part was likely what was in Roger's head at the time she did that. And like cutting the belly of the goose that laid the golden eggs, she chopped her skull. She was unwilling to do nothing about it, where unlike the foolish cottager that gave in to greed and lost out on becoming richer, the people were overcome by hunger and misery and could have gladly eaten out her brains. Not literally. This isn't District 23. Yes, her belly was, metaphorically speaking, full of golden eggs, and unlike the goose, more specifically, where she stored the money, well, let's get to what's happened next. Unfortunately, this rash action had consequences. Quite severe ones. As she was the tax collector that wielded considerable power and authority within District 25. Largely because her sibling was a member of the Middle. One that was probably pretty high up to give her that kind of power. Oh. Tanya was an executive of the Middle before she distorted and became a furry. So Rodia killed the wrong person, especially with what happened next. Now, Rodia had good intentions, yes, to save her dying neighbours. Although Sonia argued that she did it for her own good, that she couldn't stand the fact that she wasn't anyone special. As for the Middle, we learn a little about how they did their business. Apparently they never let anyone who touches their family go unpunished. They're also big on the concept of collective guilt, as they don't care who did the deed. They want to deliver punishment killing to send a message to others. And that message is, kill a member of our family, and we'll deliver it back many times over. Now, I doubt that the Middle would leave them alone, even if Roger was ratted out. And I suspect that the main reason why they didn't do the same when Roland, the black stain, killed half of the Middle in the South is because they knew it was him and didn't want to provoke him. Anyway, those that tasted quality meat for the first time in their lives were turned into cadaverous towering pillars on the roads, Ooh, even the ring would consider this to be an obscene artistic expression. The carved pagodas aren't much different. The pain and guilt was inside of Roger since then, realizing that she wasn't much different from the foolish cottager after all. Actually, it's quite different, as the consequences were the cottager's own in that story, while Roger's affected others. Since that day, nothing she held felt truly hers, all because of what she did. Sonia thought it was fine. Apparently, he pursued hundreds of books and thousands of documents, meeting various people in the city, picturing the world where the oppressed can escape from the exploitative dominion of the ruling class and find liberation in the truest sense, to make that world a reality. It couldn't be done with changing what was already there, as that page of history was already written. The world where they could reach, created using the Golden Bough, which she resonated. He envisioned a more prosperous version of the town within District 25, where none suffered from starvation, envisioning himself and Roger in the tax collector's house, with him holding a warm drink, and Roger holding a glass of beer, where every individual could enjoy the right to pursue psychological and intellectual delights, telling her to join hands with him and he'll give her the world as a gift, as if nothing up to that point had happened at all. If only that idea was that idealistic. Now, there are a few that have tried to make that vision a reality. But that much absolute power, it led to dictatorships and oppression, often worse than the regime that it ended up replacing. Who knows, this might be different if Sonia doesn't let the power corrupt him. As for Roger, she felt that glimpse of that world was so dreamlike. She wanted to etch that instant, mesmerizing as if it was in her own memory. She wanted to be a part of that dream and never leave it. Yet, she still turned him down. She didn't want to bathe in warmth yet. She wanted to be in the cold a bit longer. At least until she figures out when it'll be okay to warm herself. And also, Roger knew that Sonia knew that her temper would get the best of her and get her to kill that tax collector. And then Sonia mentioned something that might elude her. She didn't have the mark. He was hoping that she'd possess it. But he's seeing it on a few of her friends, and yes, this confused Roger for understandable reasons. Sonia then mentioned that she can't see it either, so she doesn't have what it takes to be a leader. But he's different. So, to make a better world, Roger then interrupted him by saying that she remembers him saying that when sat at a desk buried in books, which is why she didn't join him. As big words behind closed doors wouldn't feed their neighbours. He should know by now that, as she would put it, there was no way a rowdy rascal like her would fit in under some dweeb's leadership. Sonia then told them that the Golden Bough awaited them inside the castle, and he hoped that she'd find what she sought. They then made their way inside the icy castle, and fought some icy debtors inside it, killing them unfortunately caused the castle to shake. This took Dante by surprise, as were the others, as parts of the castle started to fall down from above. They were concerned of what would happen if this kept up. It was a foreboding idea, especially as their ticking was a reminder that they were low on time. They ordered the damn dozen to get outside. They did so, and Ishmael wanted to make sure that she wasn't the only one that was seeing what she was seeing. The castle wasn't falling apart, and Faust confirmed that it was rising to its feet. Gregor advised him to not look back and just run. Dante was tired just from running away just then. Missot felt footfalls, not human, slow and heavy. Ishmael snapped at him, saying that he could have just said that something mammoth was after them. He agreed that would have served better. Roger asked if they could just leg it as their job was done. They asked for a little time to think. They didn't consider what to do after getting down there. This annoyed her, as this was not the time for dopey plans. Gregor was looking for the bus. Heathcliff told them to stop talking rubbish and run away. And Faust noted that this was the first logical statement that she's heard leave his mouth. This Heathcliff off, but considering that he's prioritizing running away from what they were up against, he wisely decided not to attack her, although he did threaten to smash her skull in later. Oh, come on, Heathcliff, she's giving you a compliment here. As for what they were being chased by, it was a Godzilla-sized abnormality. Thankfully, this was the first abnormality this size. I mean, imagine anime come to life. I mean, Queen of Hatred's mini kaiju form as this size. She really would be the doom of worlds. This one is called Baba Yaga. This is based on Slavic folklore, an ogress or a deformed woman, depending on the version of the story, that sought out those that ventured into the forest, capturing them, cooking them, and eating them. Mainly children. Like their story to prevent them from venturing too deep into the forest, although in some versions, she can either help or hinder those who encounter her. She had a forest hut home that stood on chicken legs. In this case, all we can see clearly is a large bird leg that threatened to crush the sinners like insects. All they could do was run to where it couldn't crush them. But it had one bird-legged minions in the way, frosted like the miners they encountered earlier. They needed to take these down quickly before Baba Yaga caught up with them. It was tight, but they were able to succeed and ran into a cave. At the mouth of the cave, Ishmael saw the exit, likely the way that Sonia and his Urdevir used to get inside. Heathcliff complained about the persistent rotters in their way, more of what they previously thought. Dante understood that they needed to distract them somehow to get away. Ryusho suggested that they throw one of them at them. They could bring them back later anyway. And Sinclair was nervous as she was looking at him when she said that, asking why she was considering that. Then Dante noticed something that made that unnecessary. Sonia offered his assistance. That looked suspicious. Certainly did to Rodia. She asked what he was playing at. And Dante basically said, Rodia, are you high? Are you nuts like Don Quixote usually is? If he's offering to help us, why stop him? Roger had good reason to be suspicious. Those that offer help without asking for anything in return, they usually have some ulterior motive. Yeah, in the back streets, the moment you lose your cynicism is the moment that you leave yourself open to attack. She certainly had a point. If you want an example of that, just remember the story of Kali, the Red Mist. Specifically the part where she was living in that apartment block, and those that she helped tried to rob her out of simple greed. She killed her after that. The reason why Sonia did what he was going to do was the same reason why she couldn't hold herself back from using the axe on that tax collector. Yes, he can't stop himself with doing what could be considered distracting the others that were threatening them, that was trying to stop them from leaving. He then asked Dante if their organization is working to make a better place, a better world even, in its own right. Dante said that they were. Quite confused why he asked that, although they didn't know what a better world entailed. They never questioned Limbus Company's motives. Thankfully, Sonia couldn't understand dicking, and took that, as the Russians would put it, as a da. Then he told Sinclair that a child would visit him soon, confusing Dante and surprising Sinclair, especially as he saw something on Sonia's forehead for a second. Sonia noted that as well. That boy left quite an impression on him, believing it to be a touching reunion once it happens. Then he noticed something behind him. It was the Golden Bough, its faint light shining between blocks of ice. The glow was quite distinctive. They then claimed it. Although after they did so, he warned them that he's unlikely to act on the same impulse of kindness next time they meet. If there's a clear path towards prosperity of the many, he'll take that without hesitation. Yeah, we get it. The main reason why you're not doing this now is because Rodia won the card game earlier and you're a man of honor. Or at least one with standards. So in your case, binary morality doesn't really work. It's not as simple as good or evil in your case. Well, much less so than usual. Then he and the Eurodivia all showed up. Dante thought this to be a time for touching farewells, but Roger was the first to sprint to the exit. Yi Sang asked if she is not concerned. Roger didn't know what he meant. Yi Sang then went on to state that regardless of the differences between them, he was still a friend of hers. Roger implied that this wasn't the first time he's been in this kind of situation and that he'll be fine. Yi Sang saw this as an ideal form of friendship. Eventually, they got back to the bus. Dante was tired as but they knew that Virgilius wouldn't spare them his gaze until they gave him a brief verbal report, translated through Faust, of what happened that day. You'd think that he'd deliver the pain that he threatened to deliver, after hearing about how many times the plan has been up by incompetence, but he was surprisingly calm, and only one thing bothered him. It wasn't the damned dozen, it was Sonia. His actions during the final moments of the mission didn't seem to match the beliefs that he told Rodia, which is why they need to question his true intentions. Of course we should. And as for you, Virgilius, for one with a 7 association specialization, I expect nothing less. This made Rodia nervous at the questioning of Rodia's friend's intention. Yes, of Sonia's intentions. As first it was Yi Sang, one of the last that you'd expect to ask about others, now the red gaze himself. They seem to care more about Sonia than her. All that should matter in the end is that the Golden Bough is in their possession. And as a bonus, she also got something else from the casino. A colourful bunch of gaming chips. They can exchange them for cash at any casino, and suggested that they drop by one. Apparently she took them while Dante distracted those on the ground floor with the jackpots. Impressing Dante that she was able to do that. She asked if they could go out for prime sirloin steak to celebrate their outstanding success. Yes, outstanding success. Despite those times where they kept ruining the plans. And Virgilius asked what Charon thought of that. Is what Virgilius did, and that idea appealed to her as Mephi wanted that as well. Fresh, succulent, juicy meat. That isn't human. And this disgusted Gregor. Virgilius agreed to this and left it up to Rodion which restaurant to go to in District 10. Right after they cashed in... Yes, right after they cashed in the gaming chips. Outwardly, Rodia was in high spirits, but the distress was noticeable to Dante, even as she tried to hide it with a guise of joviality. Regardless, they had something to celebrate, so it was a far better outcome as they continued onwards. First to a decent meal, then onwards towards the next destination. Meanwhile, somewhere in the back streets of District 10, it's revealed that Sonia has some form of connection with Herman, seeing it as impressive that he cleaned out the legion of foes that was in the way of the damned dozen. Also, he burned all the cash. Then Heath Ledger's Joker, well, he was acting like him, in that regard at least, told her that she should know that he's never been friends with money. Seriously, he could have given that away to those that needed it. Clearly, Logic isn't a good friend of yours either, apparently. According to Herman, much has changed since he and Rodia last met, as she sees him as different from most idealists. He's no longer all talk and no trousers. But no praise was earned as he didn't retrieve the Golden Bough. He then told her that he showed Rodia that world, his ideal reality. Herman guessed that it didn't win her over. According to Sonia, it was Herman's idea, a method that was wrong after all. It'd take more than a few words to win her over. Herman asked if he found that regrettable. Well, part of him wished that she would, follow him like in the past, but he's relieved to find out that she's the same as before. Rodia didn't want a perfect world with no flaws, because it would be boring to live in such a world. For a start, there's no way to affirm that she's special. At least that's the impression he got from that. Herman thought her to be a woman of virtue, principles unshakable, but she's a dreamer, like Sonia is. Sonia sees that she still has a long way to go, even if she won't want to admit it. Her men will keep this in mind for future considerations of where to go next, where reprimands wouldn't help to get the Golden Boughs. Besides, wherever they are now, it matters more who claims them all at the end. Clearly, at least she is one that thinks long-term with this. And Virgilius, along with Yi Sang, were right to be suspicious. Okay, what have we learned so far? That there are 2 singularities in District 10, only one officially recognized. One is the Wish Power Extractor, which siphons luck from others, which can be used as a temporary tattoo that sticks on the user. Using this would make that person temporarily the luckiest individual who ever lived. The danger this poses to the casinos in what is Korean Las Vegas. It was why Jacob developed the officially recognized singularity, the lock. Something that can lock anything, from memory to objects, even whole areas. How good this works? It depends on the amount paid, as F Corp developed a means of unlocking anything, and there are EGO or psychoments that can unlock this, such as the Pipe of Moses, the distortion detective, who, according to a friend, is basically that world's Sherlock Holmes. Ezra being the Dr. Watson. Yes, Dr. Watson. I mean, what would that make... Hey, Hee-Hon? Professor Moriarty? Or is that Lady Diaz? It's also so useful. It's also weaponized by the head. I suspect that they pay quite a bit to make sure that the arbiters are ready for almost anything. I say that because Kali, the Red Mist, was able to beat one, but at the cost of her life. Although she was weakened and missing an arm at that time. The arbiters, they're basically the judges from Judge Dredd if they were a bunch of sadists. As when they execute, they take their time, while the judges just shoot them and get it over with. Preferably shooting them in the head, when they can do so. The lock is certainly useful to counter the probability manipulating abilities of the Wish Power Extractor. Then we have District 10 itself, where the casinos have security guards that check for ID with those that look suspicious, such as getting a jackpot with the first try on a slot machine. They even extract wish power using a hidden canister under the roulette table, where the businesses outside of the casinos double as pawn shops, where it has an East Asian feel to them, and are not as run down as District 4, and about as crowded as urban parts of Japan as well. Yes, there's a reason why there are hotel rooms the size of coffins there. The shopkeepers have a tradition of telling the fortune of those that enter their shop. If it's good, they loan more money. If it's bad, then the item will be paid for less than what it's worth. And when there's trouble, such as the blunt force trauma of an overzealous hero knocking a thug out cold, finally we have the Uradivi, a group that originated from District 25. They're a mix of Robin Hood and his merry men and the Bolsheviks, communists in all but name, They rob from the merchants and give it away to those that have need of it. Those that are practically starving to death. Now, this makes them unique among the syndicates as they aren't motivated by wealth and power over the backstreets, like the others are. And according to Sonia, their leader, they want to overthrow the oppressive regime that is crushing those that grow poorer. No matter how hard they work, and considering that the city is grimdark as where it's ruled by a bunch of mega-corporations that are big on the ideology of social Darwinism. Who can blame them for wanting to do that? I mean, just look at Roland. He's one of the most dangerous in that living hell. He's a selfish hole at best. He's willing to use any and all methods that he sees as needed to achieve his goals. He doesn't even care about his reputation. I mean, it took a few group therapy sessions and a beating to convince him to stop his rampage of vengeance that didn't really go away before the events of Library of Verena. I mean, if it weren't for Yuri intervening on his behalf, he'd have slowly been left to rot in District 9 in what used to be the home of him, Angelica, and what would have been their child. That's the harsh reality of a fixer. The harsh reality that Don Quixote fails to understand. You either go big and just survive, or die. That's simple. While with the syndicates, they're the one for all and all for one kind of organization. Fixer offices. Yes. Fixer officers and even the wings are mostly one for all in each scumbag for themselves. They betray others within that organization just to get the last batch of Pagion, never mind anything more, such as career advancements, among other things. Speaking of syndicates, the middle was mentioned by Sonia, hinted at as the reason why Sonia left District 25. Well, so did Rodia. Where they have a similar attitude towards collective guilt as, well, quite a few authoritarian regimes. Basically, an attack on one is an attack on all, and a disproportionate response is seen as the only way of truly maintaining order, where it's hinted that they'd react that way regardless of whether or not they get the one that attacks one of their family, blood-related or otherwise. This was also hinted by Roland that they're all about brotherhood, before he wiped out half of them in the south of the city that caused Tanya, who was one of the survivors, to distort into a powerful furry. Anyway, back to the Erudivia. If what Sonia is saying is propaganda, he believes his own, and that would make him more dangerous to those that he deals with. If he truly believes in what he's saying with sincerity. Well, if that's the case, then he's one of the few within the city that has more selfless ideals, if not having a more altruistic mindset, even considering that he has more questionable methods to do so. So while he's an anti-hero, he leans more towards the good than the evil, than most there. This is even though he might have some kind of ties with Herman, who has an affiliation with Encore, a rival to the collection of the Golden Boughs, who already has one. His connection isn't as strong as the others, at least as far as we're aware. He's likely in it for himself and his syndicates. Specifically, it's unique ideals that stand out among the others. Thankfully, it's not enough to draw the attention of powerful wings, or at least fixers. with his talk about overthrowing the wings and the oppression that they stand for and redistributing their wealth. Because if he truly was dangerous to them, he'd at least need to deal with some fixers hired to kill him, and at most, a visit from either an arbiter, who would take their time, or a claw, who would brutally tear them apart. Which makes me question. Yes, it makes me question what would happen if he did overthrow the wings and the syndicates. Would he use that power that he had, along with his group using that power, justly? Or would that power corrupt them, replacing one tyranny and oppression with a different kind, like so many other expressions of absolute power? Who knows? He's not there yet, but his story is not yet done. And N-Corp might think that it's better to have no allies outside of N-Corp than those that they can't entirely rely upon, as he seems to be more affiliated with his syndicates. Then we have how Herman appears to be planning for this. Her long game. It's implied that she's willing to wait for Limbus Company to gather the other Golden Boughs, and wait for them to come to her to acquire the last one. Then they can claim the rest, for whatever they're planning. And considering that N-Corp has access to the glass window technology, a more unstable variant of the mirror technology of Yisang, that they have a similar idea as the Ring, the Mad Artist Syndicates, that they only trust what they see, I doubt that it has any benevolent intent beside the force of using it. They'll likely want to change the world into their own twisted image, and that's based on what's known so far as they're not above using deceit and underhanded tactics to achieve their aims, such as letting their enemies tire themselves out and taking the prize from them, while they're lacking the energy to fight back. So it makes sense that they'll likely be in the shadows for now, letting the damned doesn't believe that they're not going to try the same thing twice, and then create a battlefield where they have the advantage. Or at least that's how they'll design it to be. Although how effective that will be, we'll need to wait a while to find out, because as this mission has demonstrated, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. The damned dozen have proven that a number of times, so why should N-Corp be an exception to that rule? Then there's the warning of that child that Sinclair was familiar with, that Sonia mentioned, even hinting that Chapter 3 will be all about Sinclair, whatever darkness he was keeping inside himself. We're going to find that out next. Finally, let's go over the source material. Crime and Punishment was written by Fyodor Dostoevsky, specifically with the two characters that were used as partial templates. First we have Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov. Yeah, I know. Why learn another language when you still struggle with English? Well, he's a failed law student who killed an old woman, a pawnbroker. In the source material, he initially didn't go through with robbing the pawn shop, But upon hearing about his sister's sacrifice, where she was marrying an opportunist, which was not much different than a different character's decision to be a prostitute to support her family, he then went back to that pawnbroker and killed her with an axe, along with her half-sister, to eliminate any witnesses. But the guilt of his actions eroded him. As for the prostitute that made that sacrifice for her family, that drove Rodion to commit these deeds, that prostitute was called Sonia Semonovna Marmenadova, where she was sustained by faith and was a major factor in his confession to the murders and thefts. She also helps him to become better during and after his prison sentence. Now, in Limbus Company, the gender roles are reversed, and the motives are different, where Roger was dissatisfied by Sonia's inaction and was driven to do what she did, based on seeing others starve to death. She was able to use the stolen wealth of the pawnbroker. Sadly, it resulted in a lot of punishment killings due to the pawnbroker having a sibling in the middle. As for her moral regeneration, that's still in question. Sonia's morality, it's more ambiguous, although he has faith in his ideals, and we'll eventually see where that goes. Unlikely in the next chapter, though. A winged deserter and a former syndicate member. What's next? Until next time. Hail the rabbit!